So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Star Wars. So let's start the series. It's often said that when someone dies, their life flashes before their eyes. However, other people are doubtful of such saying because they have experienced near-death experiences and have never experienced that kind of flash. Luckily, it was the former in the case of Naruto. He was not, in many respects, frightened or even sorry. He actually accepted death with complete calm, which may seem strange to some, because, if one were to look at him, one would question why a man who appeared to be in his prime would accept death so readily and without much resistance. In actuality, Naruto was much older than his appearance, which suggested he was still in his late 20s. Indeed, from the moment of his birth until now, at the age of 120, Naruto had achieved far more than most individuals, including himself, could ever hope to achieve in that short period of time. Soon after the 4th SHL Ninja World War ended, a lot of things happened after Ghost Uchiha, his partner Tobi, or Obito Uchiha as Naruto and his friends allies discovered, and consequently the 10 Tails were ultimately defeated. The most significant was the discovery that Naruto was the only son of the Yondaime headmaster. It goes without saying that the look of shock on people's faces was invaluable. That realization was a sledgehammer of embarrassment and guilt for people who had made fun of Naruto during his childhood. When the Hyde Ninja Village 11 found out, they were equally taken aback. However, because of who he was, Naruto claimed that everything was okay, and that he had forgiven everyone long ago. Yellow Ninja responded by saying that this only made Naruto a better person, and that they didn't deserve his friendship, with the exception of Cute Ninja and Iruka. Naturally, though, Naruto offered his forgiveness once more, and begged that they all move on from the past, because they still had a ninja world to create. All the ninjas from the secret villages started reconstructing their villages after a burial was held to honor the deceased, which included 5th Headmaster, Niji, Shikaku, and Yellow Ninja Ichi. However, this time, the reconstruction would guarantee peace for years to come and beyond. Finding a new headmaster was the primary priority for Hyde Ninja Village, because the 5th headmaster sacrificed her life to save the lives of the other masters, during their own conflict with Ghost Uchiha. Luckily, it turned out that she had left a scroll outlining Naruto's true relationship to Minato, and his ancestry from his mother's side, before the 5th headmaster passed away. It goes without saying that this revelation, along with his other achievements, made it easier for the civilians and ninjas of Hyde Ninja Village to choose their new headmaster. Interestingly, with the support of all the other villages, Naruto was formally appointed the Rocky-Dame, 6th headmaster of Hyde Ninja Village, a position he gladly and humbly accepted, designating his fellow graduating class members to serve as his advisors. As headmaster, Naruto's first task was to resolve the matter pertaining to his friend and his behavior. As much as Itachi wanted the facts of the Uchiha massacre to be forgotten, Naruto understood that they could not enter a period of calm and leave any cards on the table. Furthermore, continuing to conceal that particular fact would require a return to the traditional ninja system, which would only result in a sanitized peace that would ultimately fuel further hostilities. Even though he didn't specifically promise Itachi that he would keep the Uchiha massacre a secret, Naruto nonetheless told the truth about it, and what transpired the night of his birth, and he hated having to break his vow for the first time in his life. Following a cross-check and proof of the facts, Kaharu and Hamura were taken into custody, put on trial, and given the death penalty. The two elders were unrepentant throughout the entire process, claiming that they did whatever they had to do to protect Hyde Ninja Village, and that if it ultimately led to them being accused of being traitors or conspirators, so be it. This was true even though they were unaware of some facts at the time, such as Obito's existence, and the fact that he was the one who took the 9 tails from Radomon, and caused it to attack the village, which sparked many of the events that followed. Sakura needed all of her strength to resist going over there and killing the two elders personally after hearing that remark, but thankfully, a friend of Naruto had been present during the trial, and was able to soothe her. Even though his friend was later granted some forgiveness for what had happened, the other villages had removed him from the bingo books. He was still unable to escape punishment, and had to accept responsibility for his own actions. As a result, Naruto had his friend's chakra permanently sealed until he was able to regain the trust of Hyde Ninja Village, and until he felt that he had earned it, which the friend accepted. Cute Ninja was a huge help to Naruto over the entire ordeal, serving as both a confidant and a sounding board, which Naruto much valued. The Hyuga heiress was secretly bouncing up and down with delight when Naruto finally took a chance, and asked Cute Ninja out for some ramen, shortly after he was promoted to headmaster. Cute Ninja gladly agreed. Following that, things between Naruto and Cute Ninja simply took off, and eventually, the two teenagers developed a passionate relationship that Naruto never imagined was possible. However, Shizune and Shikamaru both disclosed that as Naruto was the last of his clan, he had the right to have more than a wife, in order to bring his clan back together, therefore his romantic chances did not end there. It goes without saying that Naruto blushed more than Cute Ninja after hearing this. The friend of Naruto actually made a joke about Naruto out blushing the blush mistress who was Cute Ninja that day when he heard about it. Since Naruto was unsure of what to do with the entire clan restoration act, he spoke with Cute Ninja about it. Cute Ninja responded that she was fine with sharing him if it meant that she could still be with him and love him, since only women can love their boyfriends or future husbands. Princess Koyuki Kazuhana and Priestess Shion from their separate nations informed Naruto after he followed the card. They were able to send relief after the 4th SHL Ninja War finished, despite the fact that they were unable to do so at that time, and it wasn't for want of trying. As it turned out, they intended to develop a much closer relationship with Hyde Ninja Village, so that they could provide help without going through the procedures in the event of another disaster. In addition, she wanted to remind Naruto that he had promised to provide Shion a daughter to whom she could carry on her abilities. Naturally, Naruto didn't fully comprehend her meaning at the time, but now that he understood, he was relieved that A. He had a caring and understanding girlfriend, future wife in Cute Ninja, and B. He had made the right decision in choosing the card. In addition, Mamorume, the Mizu Master, wished to improve relations between her community and the Hyde Ninja Village. All three women benefited greatly from the revelation that Naruto was the Yandame's son, not to mention how he's shown his humanity and skill as a SHL ninja throughout the conflict. Despite feeling a little overpowered, Naruto refused to give up and accepted the offers from all three women. However, he wanted to get to know them as individuals, not just for other reasons, and he was relieved to find that Koyuki, Shion, and Mei shared this sentiment. Similar to Cute Ninja, Naruto gradually came to like and adore the other three ladies. He then made the bold decision to pop the question to all four of them, and they all enthusiastically accepted. Cute Ninja was the first woman to whom Naruto proposed. After the lavish wedding, Kiba and some of the other SHL ninja wanted to take Naruto to one of the red light districts for a bachelor party, to cap off all bachelor parties, before he was legally married. However, Naruto declined and chose a different bachelor party, because he had already visited one district when he and Jiraiya were on the last leg of their 2.5-year training trip, and no women had approached him at that time. In addition, he had been busy trying to drag a half-drunk, half-beaten-up Jiraiya out of one of the bars, because the latter had been spying on some of the women in their dressing rooms. Furthermore, he had already had personal relationships with Koyuki, Shion, Mei, and Cute Ninja, when they began to take their relationship seriously. Naruto had more than loved his wedding night and honeymoon, despite the fact that he remained silent when the guys barraged him with inquiries about it involving his 4 wives. Now that he was married to 4 beautiful and powerful women and had been given the title of headmaster, Naruto started his role as the leader and protector of his village and keeper of the peace. Granted, disputes still occurred even after Ghost Uchiha, Obito, and the 10 Tails were eliminated, but Naruto and company were there to settle them, even if it occasionally required using force. That's not to imply that Naruto's colleagues didn't have a happy life. On the contrary, they had more than enough. For instance, Kiba eventually dated and married Kumo native Kari. Neither Naruto nor Cute Ninja ever knew how Kiba accomplished that feat, but he did, and he and his good friend Akamaru were able to find a mate from the Inuzuka kennels. Their offspring, and, in Akamaru's case, several puppies, grew up to be excellent ninjas in their own right. Things were slightly more difficult with Naruto's friends since, even if the entire truth about his clan was now public knowledge, along with all the other information related to it, and the last Uchiha was spared the death penalty as a consequence, he still had a long way to go before he could be trusted once more. But since he had long since decided to grant his brother's demand and eventually give up his own desire for vengeance, Naruto's friend accepted any criticism that was directed at him, because he was aware that things could have turned out far worse. Despite his occasional questions about why Naruto continued to show him compassion despite everything he and Sakura had been through, Naruto's friend came to the realization that Itachi had trusted Naruto with his younger brother, because of the latter's deep affection for him, and how much more of a brother Naruto had been than Itachi, which humbled the Uchiha more than he realized. After realizing that, his friend Naruto no longer cared if it took him a lifetime to regain the trust of the Hyde Ninja Village. Additionally, he could finally make his own decisions free from outside influences and pretenses. He avoided Sakura at first because he wasn't sure how to approach her, after he had almost tried to kill her after Danzo's death, but his friend knew he had to face the consequences, so he did. Sakura gave him a somewhat cool look, which was to be expected, but after hearing the entire story, she told him that she wouldn't judge him, because she had never experienced what he had, even though Sakura knew she would have lost it long ago, if she had been in his position. Nevertheless, after some pointless chatter, the Naruto friend apologized to Sakura and left. Later, when he wasn't performing his community service, he continued to do the same thing, simply stopping by and assisting Sakura and even the Yellow Ninja with transporting the necessary medical supplies. After accepting Sakura and Yellow Ninja's invitation to grab lunch one day, things began to take a serious turn. A person from a nearby village then attempted to break into the hospital one day, in order to take some medication. When the criminal attempted to surprise Sakura and the Yellow Ninja, they were able to subdue him. However, another accomplice managed to get the drop on the 2 Kunoichis, and if Naruto's friend hadn't been able to stop him, the second thief would have been able to kill the 2 women. This was impressive because at the time, Naruto's friend's chakra was still sealed. However, by using some improvisation, which was a skill Naruto learned from Naruto, the friend was able to stop the second accomplice and call for assistance. At that point, Naruto was sure that his companion had demonstrated his abilities as a Hyde Ninja Village Nin, and he formally had his chakra unlocked. Thankful for another chance, Naruto friend then retrained as a Genin, then as a Jonin, and finally joined the Anbu. After proving himself there, he was able to obtain the right to use the Kra, and after proposing to Sakura and Yellow Ninja, they were married, though Naruto did wonder why Naruto friend took longer than expected to take the plunge completely. Almost all of Naruto's other companions appear to experience the same thing, becoming even more skilled ninjas. Some of them married, Sai and Yakumo, Shikamaru and Tamari, and Choji with a woman from Suna, while others, Lee, SHL Ninja, and Tenten, did not. Nevertheless, they all managed to lead contented and tranquil lives despite everything. The same was true for the Jonin senseis in Hyde Ninja Village 12. There weren't many people who could tolerate Guy's flames of youth speeches, so it was shocking when Guy was able to find his own future wife, in the form of an Iowa visitor who later became a citizen of Hyde Ninja Village. Kakashi also followed the Kra route and married both Aim and Shizune. Kurenai essentially remained unmarried for a while. She would merely say, thanks, but no thanks, and devote more of her time to raising her daughter, whom she named Buwako in honor of her late lover's mother, despite the efforts of several of her fellow Jonin, to persuade her to go out and try to find love again, especially since Asuma would not want her to mourn for the rest of her life. Kurenai's situation would eventually change, though, as her daughter grew older and desired to enroll in the ninja academy. Iruka, for no apparent reason, decided to take care of Buwako while she was there. Given that he also respected Asuma and detested the fact that the latter passed away before he had the opportunity to fully live a life with Kurenai and their child, Iruka wanted to do what he could to help, even though he already knew Shikamaru was taking care of the girl as well, let alone the efforts of Naruto and Cute Ninja. However, that's the life of a dirty yellow ninja. Iruka pondered sorrowfully. Kurenai eventually asked Iruka if he would like to join her for dinner, which caused a change in their relationship. After Iruka agreed, things simply progressed until ultimately Iruka and Kurenai crossed the threshold, fell in love, and were married. They would later have 2 children of their own. Unfortunately, however, even the sun must set on one's life, and Naruto's spouses, friends, and professors were no different. At this point, Naruto began to understand that his bloodline trait long lifespans and a healing factor along with 9 beasts chakra was somewhat of a double-edged sword, because, although his 4 wives' children ended up inheriting the same trait, as did their own children, his wives did not. This saddened Naruto, but Cute Ninja and the others reassured him that they were fine with their mortality, and had long since come to terms with the fact that Naruto would outlive them. Furthermore, they could never have asked for more than the ability to spend a life with him. In order to ensure that their memories would always be remembered and revered, Naruto made care to have his 4 wives, friends, and professors' names inscribed on the memorial stone, along with emblems from their different clans and homelands. After a few more decades, Naruto realized that his time was up, and that he needed to go on to new opportunities outside of the ninja world, not simply in Fire Country or Hyde Ninja Village. The fact that Naruto had long since passed the headmaster mantle to Hyde Ninja Village, who had recently passed it on to his own successor, and that he had successfully raised his children into great individuals with the assistance of his wives, of course only, served to encourage him to follow in the footsteps of his late godfather Jiraiya. Because despite all of Naruto's experience, he still wanted to visit a lot of places. After making his statement to the whole Hyde Ninja Village, Naruto said goodbye to his beloved community, but not before making a vow to come back if they ever needed his assistance. Naruto then embarked on his new adventure. During his journey, Naruto encountered both good and bad people, as well as numerous issues that occasionally required his help. Fortunately, none of these situations necessitated him to fully utilize the chakra of 9 beasts, the 9-tailed fox. Of course, the bitch didn't hesitate to assist Naruto when he fought any foes. Eventually, Naruto found himself running into Anbu from his hometown once more. Even though Orochimaru was finally dealt with decades ago, it came out that someone else had adopted a similar objective. This time, though, it was to dominate the very fabric of time. And mastering all space-time jutsus in existence, including those that were considered prohibited, was the only way to do that. As soon as Naruto found out, he used his father's jutsu to transport himself and the Anbu back to Hyde Ninja Village, in an effort to learn more about what was happening. It turned out that the mastermind was someone who had experienced a horrific tragedy as a child, and had spent the majority of his life trying to come to terms with it. However, he eventually fell in with the wrong crowd, and eventually found one of Orochimaru's long-abandoned labs, found the jutsus there, and planned to learn the space-time ones, in an effort to save his family. Regretfully, his yearning had drove him insane, and in ways that were worse than those that his Naruto companion experienced. Though he still hoped his enemy found peace in the afterlife, Naruto knew he had to do what was required, and tried to reason with the man at first, but found it was ineffective. The enemy then began to develop a space-time jutsu during the battle at one of Orochimaru's labs, in an effort to trap Naruto in it. Naruto promptly tried to stop him, but the man's insanity and his in-depth knowledge of Orochimaru's jutsus enabled him to finish the jutsu. After that, Naruto used his own space-time jutsu in an attempt to shut down the portal his adversary had made. However, the outcome was very different from what Naruto had anticipated when his jutsu and his opponent's jutsu met, causing both jutsus to explode with light. As the light faded, the man's half-torn and mangled body lay on the ground, surrounded by Wreckmaster and a lot of debris. But in Naruto's case, he was completely absent, save for a tiny piece of orange fabric with a black flame design on it. Right now, Naruto was in a place that seemed to continue on forever, a place of nothing but pure light with a hint of gray. And while he was fatigued, he wasn't totally worn out. He was actually feeling as though he had just woken up from a slumber. What on earth? The thought crossed Naruto's mind. Hello 9 Beasts. Do you remain there? Do you hear me? From his prison, which Naruto had long since altered to appear less like a cage and more like a home, 9 Beasts said, loud and clear, Kid. Are we dead? A gentle voice said, no child. I can assure you and your resident that you are not. At the sound of the voice, Naruto turned and watched a figure emerge from the light, till at last he saw a woman standing in front of him. Given that Naruto had been married to 4 stunning women in his lifetime, one could argue that she was unfathomably beautiful with her exquisite robes, long hair that resembled a flame of pure gold, and piercing blue eyes. However, Naruto sensed a great power emanating from the woman. It was a kind of force that combined strength with gentleness in a way that was neither negative nor malicious. Naruto questioned, who are you? Then the woman grinned. I am that which created these universes that we now reside in. Not just your own, of course, but this one as well. Naruto questioned, you mean? I'm not in my own world anymore. 9 Beasts remarked, I think she just said that, kid. Luckily, the woman didn't take offense. No child. You are no longer in your own world, much less your own dimension. But how did this happen? The woman said, patience child. In a harsh but gentle manner. I promise you will know everything you need to know. So please sit down. Time stands still in a place such as this, so we need not worry about that little factor. After she and Naruto sat down, the woman said, but before anything, I would like to ask. What is your name? The woman wanted to be polite, even though she knew who Naruto was because she had seen his whole life narrative. Because of experience, Naruto wasn't sure at first if he should give this woman his complete name, but if she had somehow prevented him from dying from that space-time jutsu, then at least he could tell her. He said, Naruto. The woman remarked, good strong name. And I have to say, the meaning of those names fit you very well. Naruto blushed at the woman's remark, even though he was no longer in his teens, much less his prime years. Naruto said, thank you. So, if you don't mind me asking, who are you? I do not really have a name that you can call me, or at least not one like yours for instance, but I am the essence of life itself. I am what people in this universe call the Force. The Force? Inquired Naruto. Yes. The Force said. So, you created this universe. The Force declared, in actuality I have created all universes. But within each one I go by different names titles. For example, in your world I am known as Kami. So there isn't just one dimension like the ones I've seen, but other places where people literally live in. The Force responded, very much. When I saw the break in the barrier between your universe and this one, I acted quickly and brought you to the place between dimensions before your body succumbed to the strain, and even with your resident trying to keep you alive, you would have surely died. Naruto said, growing anxious within, wait, so you know that I have 9 beasts sealed in me? Yes. The Force answered. But do not worry. I am not someone who judges a person by their circumstances, especially those that are out of a person's control. Besides, the fact that you managed to overcome your hardships and forge bonds with even those who once belittled you is more than commendable, especially given that you managed to form an unlikely yet strong friendship with your residents. But the part that I also find favorable is that out of your bonds of love and experience, you not only defeated the ones that threatened your world, but you created a genuine peace and balance, the kind that would also allow there to be adaptation for the changing times, so there would be no room for complacency, much less allow anyone to become stagnant for the most part. The Force nodded when Naruto stated, thank you. Now the reason I have brought you here is because in this universe, there is something, or rather someone that threatens to plunge it into a darkness the likes of which have never been seen before. How so? Inquired Naruto. In this universe, I have endowed several individuals over the generations with my own abilities. This was done to ensure that my will would be carried throughout the universe, that of genuine peace and balance. Of course, as you know from your own experience, wherever there is light, there is also darkness. Naruto said, yin and yang. Correct. The Force agreed. And while my warriors were known as the Jedi, the ones who strayed from my will and became completely consumed with the dark emotions desires of all sentient beings, were known as the Sith. Later they would add the word Lord to the title to add a sense of superiority. But what exactly made some of your Jedi become Siths? Naruto inquired. It all started when one Jedi believed that the true nature of my will lied not in the light, but in the darkness itself. Now although there is power in the darkness, utilizing that kind of power alone comes with a price. You lose yourself in every single way, to the point where you are no longer the person you once were, and you become your own worst enemy. Needless to say, war between the GD and Sith was only a matter of time. It sounds a lot like what happened to my friend Naruto. Naruto pondered. The Force was asked, I assume that it sounds familiar to you, doesn't it? Naruto said, in many ways, yes. But what the Sith did not realize is that there is a power much greater than anything they could ever obtain by solely going to the dark side. Naruto inquired, what's that? Even though he suspected he already knew. Then the Force smiled slightly. I believe you know what it is. Your own parents demonstrated it when they saved you on the night of your birth. Naruto said, love. The Force said, exactly. Unfortunately, at some point after the GD-Sith war ended, the GD made the decision to forbid attachments, believing that love would be more of a hindrance than help, and at its worst, would make it possible for their own to fall prey to the dark side. But that's ridiculous, Databeo. Angrily said Naruto, his speech tick finally showing. In my experience, one becomes stronger by having someone precious to them. It's what gives someone a reason to train and get stronger, so he or she can protect those they care about, as long as you're not taking unnecessary shortcuts. I'm sorry, but not having any bonds of any kind while honing your skills kind of defeats the purpose of the whole thing. What exactly makes these GD believe that no attachments bonds will accomplish anything? The Force said, in all honesty, even they do not know. Forbidding attachments in their code was created more out of fear than actual adaptation to the times. After all, if one was to get desperate enough, he or she would be capable of anything, even betraying who they are inside. Well, I can tell you in my experience, there was a moment in my life where I was truly tempted to give up, but then a friend of mine who later became my wife reminded me that if I was to truly give up, if I was to go back on everything I believed in, then I will have truly killed my friends' comrades' loved ones. And that as hard as it was to see some of my comrades killed, I learned that I can keep their memories safe in my heart, and in that sense, they would always live on. Naruto continued. And that brings us to why I have brought you here. Knowing that the Sith were on the rise, I knew that the time to bring my chosen one to this universe was at hand, and so 10 years ago I had my child conceived by my will within the womb of a slave mother. The purpose of my chosen one is to bring balance, and doing so means not just defeating the Sith Lords once and for all, but to also bring about change to the GD order, so they never lose sight of what my will is, what true strength is, and where it really lies in, which is love. It sounds like what I and my brothers and sisters, 9 beasts, were told by the sage of the 6 paths. In a mysterious way, of course. Is your chosen one with his mother still or? No, he was found by a GD whom to me represents the better part, if not the only better part of the order. However, despite being able to help defeat an organization known as the Trade Federation and save the planet called Naboo, the GD order had decided not to have my chosen one trained, which fortunately coincides with my will. Confused, Naruto questioned, you don't want him trained? I do, but I cannot and will not have it be done by an order that would only ostracize him because he is different, much less a recently knighted GD, who, even with his good intentions, would only be callous to my chosen one's issues, instead of helping him overcome them, and only critique him more than encourage him. The Force insisted. Discipline is important, but so is encouragement and lending a friendly ear. I can definitely understand that. Naruto pondered. Not only that, but the Sith have managed to cloak themselves so well that they are in plain sight of the GD, and the latter parties are not even aware of it. And as I have said before, the GD cutting themselves off from the people they serve and becoming proud of their own stature to the point of arrogance, has been more offending to me than what the Sith have done, which is not a statement I make lightly, considering the atrocities the Sith have committed over the millennia. That reminds me of something my father once said in my world. Naruto replied. And the Force said, what did he say? He said with the SHL ninja system we had years ago, genuine peace could never be achieved. And that as long as we stick to the very same system we have been using and don't adapt for the times, that system eventually becomes disordered, and in the end, the only thing that results is more people becoming consumed by hatred and turn into monsters because of that hatred. Plus, to be a true SHL ninja, which I guess would be another version of a GD, means to fight that hatred. But if the system stays unchanged, then the cycle of hatred continues with no end, and any efforts made by good SHL ninja are all done in vain, and good lives are unnecessarily lost. Wise words, the Force noted. And that is exactly why I have brought you to this universe. That's when Naruto understood what he was doing for the Force. You want me to train your chosen one? Yes, the Force said. Now I know you do not have powers endowed from me in this universe, but your own set of gifts, coupled with all the experiences you have gone through, are exactly what my chosen one will need if he is to fulfill his destiny. And do not worry in regards to training my chosen one to hear my voice. I already have someone who will help on that end, and you will be able to see him as well. So then, where do I literally go from here? You'll be sent to a desert planet known as Tatooine. My chosen one is on his way there and should be landing there momentarily. Go to him and protect him. Naruto and the Force stood up, and he said, okay. But one thing, though before I go. What is your chosen one's name? His name is Anakin Skywalker. Sincerely, Naruto said, good name. The Force said politely, thank you. All the best to you Naruto, I will be with you both. Naruto nodded courteously and kindly before the woman vanished, and he felt as though something was grabbing hold of him, as the scenery around him turned from a never-ending expanse of white or semi-gray to a scorching desert. Oh no. It's very hot. Naruto squeezed his eyes so tightly that he had to squint in order to see through the glaring sun. You're telling me? Exclaimed Nine Beast. Even Suna was never this attractive. What is this world like? Don't know, but I highly doubt there are many worlds that have two suns. The Nine Beasts said. After that, Naruto raised his head once more and saw two suns in the sky. It's no surprise that it's a desert. No doubt, but come on, there's settlements just ahead. Hopefully they have shade, and for your own sake, water. I understand. Before heading to what appeared to be an ancient village with people and other animals strolling around, Naruto unfurled a hood from his cloak and wrapped it over his head, thinking to himself and his companions bitch. When Naruto saw the non-human beings, he thought sarcastically, well, Nine Beast. We're not in Hyde Ninja Village anymore, I believe. The fox agreed with its own snarky tone, saying, no shit. One word could perfectly capture the feelings that Anakin Skywalker was experiencing as he disembarked from the spacecraft at Mos Espa spaceport. Despair. He was turned away by the GD order, and returned to this dust bowl of a planet known as Tatooine, even though he had assisted Padme, later revealed to be Naboo's Queen Amidala herself, and her allies, in obtaining the hyperdrive parts for her ship, and even managed to later destroy one of the droid control ships that had saved Naboo from the Trade Federation's clutches. The GD's justifications that he was too old and had too much anger in him were the parts that truly disturbed him. Well, I realized that my brief argument with Greedo was quite foolish, but when did I start acting rudely toward anyone other than that Slimo? If they were referring to my childhood, then, well, living on Tatooine wasn't exactly a picnic, but it wasn't so bad that there weren't some positive aspects. I mean, I had my mother. Watto was a far better slave master than most others, despite the fact that I had pushed him away a few times. Kitster and the other children were around, and I could tinker with things and pod race whenever I had the chance. I loved doing it, even though it worried my mother to no end. Despite everything, though, I still wanted to accomplish more. My goal was to assist others. That's why I hoped that I could accomplish that as a GD. Nevertheless, Anakin chose the latter option since he knew there wasn't much he could do, and already knew he could either dwell on the whole thing or just brush it off, no matter how difficult it was, and move on. If nothing else, they were kind enough to give me some cash. Anakin reflected as he recalled receiving cash from his two GD escorts that was recognized in a location like Tatooine. The younger GD appeared empathetic, but the senior GD appeared more unconcerned, which the child found incomprehensible. Why do some of them act like they have gaffi sticks up their ass if they are supposed to be peacekeepers? Why don't they resemble Qui-Gon more? Anakin headed to the spot he and his pals used to visit since he was thirsty, and hoped to discover his next course of action after Rubibliel. But according to certain Force clues Qui-Gon taught him back when he was alive, Anakin realized he was being followed as soon as he was almost at his stop. Anakin moved swiftly, avoiding whatever was pursuing him by taking to the alleys. Even so, Anakin could only avoid his assailants for a short time, until they surrounded him on both sides of the lane. Anakin recognized the voice as saying, well, look at what the Nexu dragged in and pissed all over. When Anakin saw the Dug emerge ahead of the punks who had cornered him, he snarled, Sebulba. The Dug said in a sour tone, you really have a lot of nerve coming back here Skywalker, especially if you knew the humiliation I had to endure thanks to you. Well, what can I say? I guess I just don't know when to quit while I'm ahead. Anakin replied. Sebulba noted, obviously. But consider that your final mistake, Bantha Pudu. Keeping the sharp humor going, Anakin added, and just how do you figure that? So Sebulba wouldn't suspect that he was a little more anxious than he was expressing. Well, let's just say while I was recuperating from my loss to you, which you only won by luck, not skill, I overheard that Gardella was in need of some new recruits for her brothel. Anakin's expression darkened. And since I had spent some time wondering how to pay you back, if I ever saw you again, well, I don't think I need to draw you a picture, now do I? So in a way, one could almost call it full circle. You and your harlot mother used to be under Gardella's thumb, now you are back here, about to be sent back to her. Anakin then overcame his trepidation and stood up in front of the Dug. If you want to go ahead and insult me, fine. But don't you dare insult my mom. Sebulba then pointed to his hired thugs, who seized Anakin, and said, sorry to disappoint you Skywalker, but unlike the Glim and Glam that's Coruscant or any of those other Republic systems, you're back on Tatooine, and right now, I'm the one holding the winning sabak hand. The punks were too strong for the child, despite his best efforts to defend himself. Now if I were you, I would try to enjoy these last moments of freedom, Skywalker. Cause they're going to be the last ones you'll ever have. However, a small dagger struck the ground next to Sebulba as soon as he finished speaking, and then several more followed, each striking the ground close to the Dug's allies. Everyone heard the noise and turned to see where it was coming from, but all they could see were the drapes and other random fabrics covering some of the windows and walls. Seeing a tag at the end of the handle, one of the punks who wasn't clinging to Anakin grabbed up one of the dagger-like weapons. But the instant he touched the tag, it exploded, blinding the punk with the pepper spray and tiny flashbangs. The other daggers then appeared to go off, releasing a great deal of smoke that filled the alley, and caused Sebulba and his friends, including Anakin, to start coughing. Sebulba, unable to see through the haze, shouted, "Is this another one of your tricks, Skywalker?" Naturally, Anakin didn't respond because he was also attempting to see through the haze. Then he sensed 3 other people going through the smoke and around the place. In a matter of seconds, the sound of kicks and punches was heard, and then the punks began to moan in agony. Anakin then witnessed Sebulba take off and fly down the alleyway and into the streets. Anakin then concentrated his senses in an attempt to see what was going on, but he stumbled on a piece of concrete and nearly fell on his back before being caught by powerful hands from behind. A soft voice said, "It's okay, kid. I got you." Anakin looked up to see who his mysterious rescuer was, but an orange hood covered his face, leaving him wondering, who? What's going on? The boy saw only a flash of yellow before he and the stranger found themselves on one of the rooftops, which fortunately had a shaded canopy protecting them from the 2 suns. "Ask me again later. Right now let's get out of this dump before that slime bucket over there comes back with more of his buddies." "Hold on," said the stranger as Anakin grabbed onto the former's wrist. It wasn't difficult for Naruto to locate Anakin, but adjusting to a completely new world with twin suns was another matter. When he finally found some shade, he attempted to buy some drinking water, but was unsuccessful because the shops would not even accept his money in return for anything to drink. Naruto body flitted to a shaded canopy on one of the roofs, then utilized his chakra sensing to find Anakin's possible location. He was able to pinpoint Anakin's location in less than a second. Although he was uncertain whether Anakin's use of the Force-given abilities qualified as chakra, Naruto surmised that it most likely did. In addition, Anakin was surrounded by an almost blinding energy that was enthusiastic and upbeat rather than unsettling. But Naruto could also detect a few goons who had seen Anakin and were pursuing him. Naruto didn't need another second to realize that those punks were trouble, so he made 2 shadow clones and had them hide among the various objects scattered around, while he marked a spot on the roof with his chakra, so that when he came to the kid's aid, he could teleport both of them back here, using the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. When he and his rescuer finally emerged, Anakin exclaimed in amazement, "Whoa. That was wizard." The stranger, "Yeah, pretty cool, huh?" Anakin turned and looked around, saying, yeah." The stranger drew back his orange hood to reveal the face of a tall young man with blonde hair lighter than Anakin's, but with a spiky appearance to match. "Whoever you are. Thanks," Anakin replied to the stranger. The man wore a black long-sleeve zip-up tracksuit, khaki pants, 2 fingerless gloves with a metal plate, and a few pouches on his person, 2 on his right leg, 1 on the back of his belt. He also had a black headband, piercing blue eyes, and what appeared to be whisker marks on his cheeks. The ensemble was finished with a short-sleeved cloak that had a black flame design around the edges, and was red on the inside, but orange on the outside. With a fox-like smile, the stranger said, "You're welcome." Anakin excitedly shook Naruto's hand as he said, "I'm Naruto, but you can just call me Naruto for short." "Anakin Skywalker." Naruto commented, "Good name." In response, Anakin said, "Thanks. Are you a GD?" Naruto replied, "No. Although I suppose in some ways I am, and in some ways I'm not." "How do you mean?" "Well, it's kind of a long story." Anakin murmured with a hint of despair, "I got time. I was on my way to my mom's, but that Doug and his cronies." Naruto said angrily, "Yeah, I saw what was happening, and I overheard what that scumbag was planning to do." "He's not dead, is he?" "No, he's alive, but he'll be in a lot of pain for a while," Naruto replied. "Hopefully he'll back off." According to Anakin, "I doubt it. If he still has a grudge against me for winning the Boon to Eve race even now, he'll be back." "Well, tell you what, how about if we go to your place, and I'll tell you and your mom everything you want to know," replied Naruto. Anakin replied as he and his new companion stood up, "Sounds like a plan. But how do we get down?" Naruto motioned for the younger youngster to take hold of his wrist and stated, "That's easy." When Anakin did, they both promptly body flitted to the ground. Anakin marveled, "You have got to show me how to do that." Naruto said, "One day, I will." "So where do you and your mom live?" Anakin said, "Actually, not too far from here. Come on, I'll show you the way." It appeared to Shmai Skywalker to be just another day. Ani would typically be up and about, getting a drink of water and going to his room makeshift workshop to experiment with things until Watu needed him in his shop. She would then begin cleaning the various computer systems after making breakfast, or, in this case, dinner. Yes, that's how things usually are, but now that Ani is gone, everything seems empty. She understood, however, that it was the correct thing to let her son depart with Qui-Gon Jinn. She was aware that Ani wasn't just any person, and that his purpose extended beyond being a slave. When she heard a knock on the door and a voice that was all too familiar yelling, "Mom, it's me," Shmai halted her activities and went directly to the door, opening it to discover her darling son and a tall young guy, who appeared to be an elder Ani in some ways. Shmai's mouth dropped open in surprise as she said, "Ani." Anakin hurried into his mother's arms and shouted, "Yeah, Mom. It's me." His mother embraced him fiercely, seemingly unable to let him go. Remembering the times he used to embrace his own children, Naruto watched the scenario with a faint smile on his face. Shmai questioned, "What are you doing here?" "It's a long story, Mom. A really, really long story," Anakin replied. Shmai questioned the tall stranger, "And who are you?" Naruto smiled and said, "I'm Naruto. I take it you are his mother." "Yes. I am Shmai Skywalker." Naruto bowed courteously and remarked, "It's nice to meet you." Shmai glanced at her son Naruto and said, "How?" "Well, I think your son put it best. It's a very long story," answered Naruto. Given that the sandstorms were now intensifying, Shmai pulled the two inside and added, "Well, please, come in." After supper, Anakin finished his story, and Shmai was taken aback. Despite everything her son accomplished to help everyone on Naboo, the Jedi Order decided not to have Anakin trained, and Qui-Gon lost a battle against a Sith Lord. Shmai's regard for the Jedi Order declined significantly, with the exception of Qui-Gon. Anakin only shook his head when Shmai questioned, "And they couldn't just make an exception for you?" "No? I don't get it," Shmai reflected. "How can they be so narrow-minded as to not break the rules this once, if they are tasked with servicing people? Some people still refuse to be adaptable, even in different time frames." Naruto pondered. In semi-disgust, Nine Beasts said, "The more I hear about this Jedi Order, the more I see it as another faction like Root. If that rotting corpse Dans were alive in this timeline, he would have loved it. It sucks, but what can I do? Qui-Gon's gone, and although Padme tried to get her government to help free you, they wouldn't allow her to. Since I was kind of under Qui-Gon's charge, the Order decided to send me back here." Anakin replied with a resigned voice. "Well, despite everything, I am glad that you're here, even if it wasn't the way you would have wanted," Shmai replied. Naruto was asked by Shmai, "So what's your story?" After seeing Shmai mention this, Naruto was unsure of how to provide his own version of events. Although it would be unrealistic to tell them that he was originally from another dimension, and that the Force had sent him here to assist Anakin, Naruto had no other means of explaining it to them, although he had a sneaking suspicion that both mother and son had already witnessed their fair share of weird, unexplained things, so he took a chance and started his story. "Honestly, I'm not really sure where to begin, but as to how I ended up here, well, it's because the Force herself sent me here from another universe." For a few seconds, Anakin and Shmai's faces were filled with shock and incredulity. "I think I'm supposed to hear the punchline, but it's not coming, is it?" replied Anakin. "No," replied Naruto. "I'm afraid not." A compassionate voice said, "And speaking for myself, I know for a fact he is not joking." As he took the vacant seat across from Shmai, Naruto, Anakin, and Shmai turned, and a picture of the now deceased Qui-Gon Jinn appeared just across the table. Anakin questioned, "Master Qui-Gon?" Qui-Gon smiled warmly and charmingly at Anakin and his mother, saying, "Yes, Ani, it is me." Anakin asked, "But how? I mean, I thought you died." Qui-Gon stated, "Only in a physical way, young one. And you must be Naruto, am I right?" As he recalled the Force informing him of another person assisting Anakin's training, Naruto remarked, "The very same." After hearing Naruto's life narrative from the Force, Qui-Gon stated solemnly, "Well, it is an honor and a privilege to meet someone of your stature." Before focusing on Anakin and his mother, Naruto said, "Thank you, Qui-Gon-sama." Naruto came to the realization that he couldn't use his own words alone to describe his life narrative. However, based on the manner in which Qui-Gon presented himself to Naruto, the former Hagak suspected that the Maverick Jedi was already aware of everything, leaving just the matter of Shmai and Anakin. Not whether to tell them or not, but how to do it, was the dilemma at that point. "I know we only just met them, Naruto, and given our collective experience, it normally wouldn't be a good idea, but if we're going to help this other kid do whatever it is he needs to do, then I think it's best if we put most, if not all the cards on the table," Nine Beasts replied. "Especially if the boy has a handle on sensing whether someone is lying or keeping secrets, and it seems he does. And if we're gonna be on this sandbox for a while." Yes, before making a choice, Naruto gave it some thinking. Naruto grabbed an unused napkin from the center of the table, took a pen out of his flak jacket, and began drawing something on it. "Honestly, I think it's best if I show you." Naruto placed the napkin in the center of the table, after quickly drawing a complex sign on it. He then put his right hand on the napkin more precisely, the symbol he had drawn, and his left hand on his tummy. Naruto told Anakin, Shmai, and Qui-Gon, "All right, now I need everyone to put their hands on the napkin." "Gonna do it, huh?" inquired Nine Beast. Naruto attested. Nine Beasts sarcastically remarked, "I guess I'd better hide the Ichi novels." I know it sounds weird, but trust me, it'll make explaining a whole lot easier. Naruto continued. The symbol began to light as a result of Anakin, Shmai, and even Qui-Gon placing their hands on Naruto's own. The next thing Anakin, Shmai, and Qui-Gon knew, they were standing in what appeared to be a factory interior, with water dripping into the bottoms of their boots. Qui-Gon, being a force spirit, of course, didn't have to worry about water. Anakin said, Where are we? Naruto responded, physically, we're still sitting in the kitchen. Mentally though, we're in the landscape of my mind. This completely caught Shmai off guard, but Qui-Gon's kind hand on her shoulder calmed her. According to Naruto, follow me. There's someone I need all of you to meet. For my story is connected to this individual. The trio soon arrived to what appeared to be a gate leading to a costly mansion or palace, complete with warning signs for trespassers and other things that might have been movie posters or other items. Anakin simply inquired, what is Icha tactics? After he spotted one of the posters. Naruto led his guests to the gate, saying, just follow me. As they approached, Anakin discovered that the gate was open, and that he could feel a tremendous amount of power emanating from it. Unaware of what it was, Anakin moved in front of his mother, slightly behind Naruto, out of concern for her safety. Naruto yelled, Nine Beast, we're here. Well, come on in, replied Nine Beast. Let's not be lurking near the gate. It's quite rude if someone does that. As the creature emerged into the light, Shmai, Anakin, and Qui-Gon saw a gigantic fox with orange-red fur, red eyes, and 9 tails. Their eyes opened as they saw the silhouette materialize from behind the open gate. Welcome to my humble abode, everyone. Nine Beasts grinned implacably. Even though the bitch had long since given up its animosity toward people, it nevertheless enjoyed it when new visitors seemed apprehensive about it. Other than Naruto, Qui-Gon was the only one who had mostly remained composed, yet despite his personal experience and all that the Force had shown him about Naruto, the GD Master was still a little unprepared for this kind of occurrence. Thankfully, Naruto was able to sense his guests' nervousness, and made an effort to reassure them. I know this is way out of anyone's comfort zone, but I promise Nine Beasts not going to hurt you. Its bark is much worse than its bite, unless you're an enemy. Naruto reassured. Fortunately, no one here is. Nine Beasts moved over and sat down between Naruto and Qui-Gon, saying, although these Sith Lords I've heard about seem to be up my alley, if you want to talk foes. Shmai looked from Nine Beasts and Naruto and remarked, pardon me, but this is a bit much to take in. Shmai looked cool on the outside, but she was on the edge of losing it on the inside. Naruto gave a soft smile. I promise all of you that I'll tell you everything you want to know and more. But just so you don't think I'm some crazy guy making up stuff, even with Qui-Gon Sama here, I brought you here because what I'm about to tell you involves my friend here as well. He finished by pointing to the 9 Beasts. Shmai glanced at the tailed beast with a worried expression on her face, wondering how that thing fit into Naruto's existence. Even though he was becoming quite tired of the enormous fox, Anakin asked Naruto, so where did it all start? He was curious to find out who his new friend was. Following that, Naruto smiled once more, giving Anakin and Shmai the impression that he was older than he actually was. It starts all the way back, at the very beginning, said Naruto. Shmai and Anakin were just amazed when Naruto continued his story, with 9 Beasts adding details of its own, and Anakin occasionally interrupting. Given how Naruto used to be at that age, Anakin's interruptions didn't anger Naruto. Shmai and Anakin were crying at certain moments, particularly when discussing Minato and Naruto Mom's ultimate sacrifice. Qui-Gon shed a tear to himself. The fact that Naruto endured so much at such a young age, more than he and his mother had ever experienced, and yet continued to move forward, not only overcoming the numerous challenges he faced, but also finding love and happiness, was nothing short of amazing to Anakin, who at that time felt a strong bond with the older blonde. I still can't believe you're as old as you are, yet you seem no older than 25 or so, Shmai replied. Well, between the long lifespan I got from my mother's clan and 9 Beasts' power, I can't say it's only because of clean living, Naruto replied. 9 Beasts noted, well, if one was to count eating ramen noodles most of the time as clean living. Naruto replied, slipping into his customary teasing with the fox, hey, Hina-chan and the others made more than that, furball. Even though 9 Beasts knew that Shion, Mei, and Koyuki were the ones who issued the threat outvoting Cute Ninja at the time, it nevertheless answered, and was it before or after they threatened you with no sex, if you didn't start eating more than ramen? Naruto exclaimed, 9 Beast, come on. We got a 10-year-old present here. Now understanding what the Icha tactics poster he had previously seen suggested, Anakin said, it's okay. I've heard worse. Shmai said nothing in response, but even though she had heard of such rules, she still thought it was a little odd that a guy could have more than one wife in Naruto's case, 4 women despite her admiration for his life story. But anyway, that's why even though I do age, it isn't physically obvious. But even with that, I can be fatally wounded if the injury's bad enough, and my healing ability can't handle it. Naruto went on. So during the fight, I was caught in the explosion, and the next thing I know, I'm face to face with the Force herself, and that's how I ended up here. So the Force made it to where the GD Order wouldn't train me, replied Anakin. Naruto replied, yeah. But why? Based on what she told me, I think the order would only try to mold you into what they feel somebody like you should be, as opposed to just teaching you the skills and helping you harness them to where they fit you, which wouldn't have worked out well. Naruto replied. Knowing that Shakti was one of the few who wasn't like many of the council members and occasionally disagreed with them herself, Qui-Gon said, of course, not all GD are like that, but those very few are not able to speak their words in. Anakin stated, I think they ought to speak up. I know. But they have to want to listen. Forcing them to listen does not accomplish anything in the long run, remarked Qui-Gon. Anakin questioned, even if it's for genuinely good reasons. Qui-Gon, who was well aware of his own conflicts and disappointments with the GD Council and their methods, stated solemnly, even then. But hey, all clouds have a silver lining. Naruto replied. And I say you got the better end of the deal in the long run. Besides, had you been trained by those guys, you would have to worry about those sticks in the mud hovering over you, and be waiting to criticize you if you so much as sneeze wrong. Which Anakin and the rest of the group laughed at. According to Nine Beast, Naruto's right. And if these Sith Lords have managed to hide themselves to the point where those GDs can't attack them even if they're in plain sight, then it's all the better that you weren't trained by them. More than likely you would have been right in front of a Sith at some point, and you wouldn't even have known it. Or worse, if you fought one, you wouldn't be well prepared. The discussion went on for a while, but it came to an end when it was decided that Anakin would be trained by Naruto and Qui-Gon. It was also decided that they would start training Anakin after breakfast tomorrow, and Naruto promised to do everything in his power to help Anakin free his mother from slavery. Naturally, Anakin's new friend and everything that was sealed inside him as well as her ability to see Qui-Gon's force spirit overwhelmed Shmai. However, she realized that a champion, unrestricted by the outdated rules of the GD Order, was needed to help guide her son, because trouble was brewing throughout the galaxy. However, based on her knowledge of Qui-Gon from his brief stay here and her recent viewing of Naruto's life story, she concluded that Anakin had a better chance of becoming more than what he had been born into and of changing the lives of many people, under the combined guidance of Naruto and Qui-Gon. Following everyone's slumber, Naruto used a sleeping bag to sleep on the living room floor. The air surrounding Anakin's bedroom started to light and shimmer, before the Force herself showed up. The Force then spent the next few minutes looking at her only child with a loving smile, pleased that the events had gone as she had wished. The Force then showed up to disclose to them all the actual purpose of her chosen one, and what she had originally planned, when the first and second generations of the Skywalker family were reunited in the afterlife alongside Obi-Wan and the others in the alternate timeline. It would be an understatement to say that Obi-Wan, Yoda, and a few other members of the Old Order were in the hot seat after she had fully disclosed the situation. Not even Satine Kryze looked entirely sympathetically at her boyfriend Obi-Wan. In actuality, Han Solo, Ben Skywalker, and Jaina Solo all expressed the same viewpoint, which added up to this assertion. No offense, but what kind of fucked up system were you guys operating by? Han continued by saying that it was not surprising that Palpatine took over so quickly, now that they had all the answers, something his wife and brother-in-law had long sought, despite what Leia had discovered in Shmai's journal, and from R2's holovids. It wasn't just cause that monster learned how to adapt, but also because you guys stayed stuck in the past. You didn't bother to change with the times, and the only thing you really taught your students was how to be something less than droids. Anakin Skywalker himself broke the ice by telling Han that there was no need in focusing on the past, who was at fault, or how things may have turned out, because what occurred happened, and there was no way to reverse it, something he was all too familiar with. Now, all they could do was accept it, go on, and be happy that they were all together once more, and that no one would be left out. After agreeing, Yoda said something that was essentially an outright admission of the Old Order's complete failure. In the end, understood nothing, we of the Old Order did. And paid the price for it, Anakin and Padme's family had. How ironic it is, that in death we had to learn something Anakin had already known, the power of love, and by trying to have him conform to our now ridiculous code, and forsake that emotion only invited tragedy for everyone. And yet Luke, who inherited his mother's will, brought our chosen one back via that love, thus showing us of the Old Order, just how much to learn we still have. Wonder do I, for one last time though, how things might have been had we learned this sooner. Who says an elderly master can't pick up new skills? Then, as she reflected on the Force, she recalled how Anakin, Padme, and their family, friends, children, and grandchildren all reconnected. Luke was disappointed that Obi-Wan had not told him the entire story, particularly about his and Leia's birth mother, but he still forgave his mentor, and with that, everyone was at peace. According to the Force, I know I cannot change what had transpired in that other timeline, Anakin was told quietly. But I can at least give you, your angel, and your friend's family a better chance of bringing balance and, most importantly, happiness in this one. Naturally, the Force was aware that her chosen one would still face difficulties despite this new opportunity. Particularly since she was aware that someone from Naruto's universe had also found their way to this one, when the dimensional fissure occurred, and she had successfully recovered Naruto. Even though he was eternally walled away and lost all of his greatest powers except for his ability to see, this person managed to hang on long enough to survive the transfer between universes and reach a planet that could support him. Regretfully, Darth Sidious also utilized this planet as one of his covert outposts. The Force realized right away that no Jedi could stop Sidious if the Sith Lord found out about him, and it appeared that he did, especially if he managed to manipulate those eye powers for his own benefit. Of course, that didn't include the difficulties her chosen one would face in the future. Thankfully, however, that was where the former Orange Headmaster and the unconventional Jedi Master entered the picture. And she knew that her chosen one's foundation would be solid, not brittle, under their guidance, based on what the Force sensed in both men's hearts. And with the assistance of others who would later mentor Anakin, that foundation would only become stronger, but only when Anakin and his future mentors were prepared. With his mother and his new companion Naruto, her chosen one would be protected for the time being. Naturally, Qui-Gon would also be present to keep an eye on them. The Force smiled warmly and said, "My child, you will do much more than just destroy the Sith. You will give the people of this galaxy an ideal to strive towards. Although many will resent you and even oppose you because you are different, there will also be many who will race behind you in inspiration. They will stumble, and they will fall. But in time, they will join you in the sun." The Force then bowed her head and planted a kiss on her chosen one's head, before disappearing with her parting words. "In time, you will help them accomplish wonders." As Palpatine, also known as Darth Sidious, moved through the corridor of his Sith outpost to the medical bay, the sound of footfall reverberated throughout the Sith temple. Sidious wasn't one to visit a Sith outpost very often, much less the most well-known of them, but his own insight showed that a visit to Corbin might be worthwhile. Naturally, Sidious was unable to identify it, but he trusted his intuition and traveled, and as soon as he entered the temple, the Sith Lord noticed what appeared to be a rupture in time and space. And who but a figure that appeared so malnourished and distorted beyond recognition and logic should emerge from the break? When Sidious saw the figure was still alive, he put it in a healing trance, and had several med droids get it back to tank ready for his new guest. At last, Sidious was able to get a better look at the stranger he had saved. Sidious could tell that the figure was physically damaged, even though the Bacta was performing its job. As intrigued as he was to ponder who and what would have inflicted such injuries, Sidious was more interested in the identity of this person, because he sensed that a great power had once resided within the stranger, but that power now appeared to be empty. Almost empty, actually. This led to the question of whether this individual could hasten the Sith Lord's schemes. After he was out of the tank, and the med droids had dressed him in a basic tunic and slacks, the stranger asked in a drowsy voice, Where am I? The med droids helped the stranger to a medical bed because he was unable to get up on his own. As he came into view, Sidious said, "Well, since you were so courteous to ask, you are on Corbin." "Corbin? What village is that?" "My dear friend, this is no village, but rather a temple. Corbin is the name of this planet, and more specifically, this star system." "Meaning?" "I am not in a village, much less my own world." "No, I'm afraid not," Sidious replied. The stranger was asked, "And who are you?" "I am Darth Sidious, Lord of the Sith and soon, Lord of the Galaxy." The stranger then chuckled lightly and grinned. Spoken like a true master. Arrogant to the last. "Well, aside from a few naive exceptions," he continued. "Master?" said Sidious again. "It's a word that literally means shadow, but from where I come from it's another term for someone who is the leader or lord of a village." "Fascinating," said Sidious. "And what, I ask, is your name?" "My name is Gosichuha," the man said. Sidious said, "Interesting name." Gosichuha shot back, "Only to those who don't know of me." Sidious answered, "Indeed. But perhaps you can tell me more about who you are, and how exactly you came to this dimension." While straining to speak, Gosichuha shouted, "And why? Should I tell you anything?" "Well, I believe I just saved your life, such as it is. I suppose a simple explanation isn't too much to ask for," Sidious said. "Besides, despite Tabacta's efforts, you still don't seem to be in very good health, which I find quite perplexing. Now I can place you back in the Bacta tank and continue your recuperation, but I would much prefer to know my guests a little more before I decide to act. After all, I wouldn't want to be healing a potential enemy back to full strength." Being this defenseless, and in such a perilous position was neither of those things, much less being at the mercy of this person who appeared to possess a unique power. Gosichuha was many things and had been in more difficult situations than most. Although it wasn't chakra, it was very similar to it, particularly on the inside, but also distinct. It wasn't to be laughed at, even though the energy was little compared to what he used to have when he had all of Kagaya's might. However, despite his weakness, Gosichuha wasn't going to allow this Darth Sidious to enjoy the delight of being at his mercy. Gosichuha remarked, "If you knew who and what I really am, you would be cowering in fear." In an unassuming tone, Sidious noted, "Well, circumstances seem to say otherwise. Now, if you wish to persist with this attitude, I could put you back where I found you." Ghost Uchiha became enraged at this, but he composed himself as he knew there wasn't much he could do right now. Very well. In my world, I was what one would call a SHL ninja, a warrior if you will. But I considered myself a savior. When Sidious heard this, he wasn't sure if he should chuckle or instruct Ghost Uchiha to stop talking. However, the Sith Lord was prompted to listen by his own feelings and interest. A savior? And how so? Ghost Uchiha answered, by creating not a brand new world, but rather, a brand new reality. A reality where there is no such thing as fear or conflict of any kind. Just peace. Fascinating. Ponderous thinking. And how exactly would you do this? By attaining power. But not just any type of power, but the power of an entity so great that it almost cannot be contained. Ghost Uchiha clarified. Sidious's interest was now aroused. What entity was this? The one-eyed god, but many called it the Ten Tails. Confused, Sidious repeated, the Ten Tails. An entity whose power cannot be measured in any way, shape or form. A progenitor of life. One who can spit volcanoes and create lands with merely a glimmer. And that's just the beginning. Ghost Uchiha clarified. Only one man before me was ever able to harness his power and bring about peace. And for a time, he succeeded. My mission was to accomplish exactly that, but in a way that would surpass even what he had accomplished in his own lifetime. And after a long time of both patience and acquiring the necessary tools, I was then able to harness that exact power. Unfortunately, two SHL ninjas, one being of my own clansmen, were foolish enough to interfere with my plans. As a result, I was not only stripped of my power, but left as something less than a shadow of what I was, and sealed away beyond my own dimension, beyond time itself. To where my existence was a living hell, until the break in space-time caused me to end up here. Sidious inquired, do you know what caused the break? Not at first, but when I was in the gap between the dimensions, I was able to pick on the chakra of one individual who was also in the gap. And it was none other than one of the two directly responsible for my defeat and imprisonment. Ghost Uchiha concluded with an angry tone. So the tear did not just happen on its own accord. Ghost Uchiha replied, no. And while I am certain my enemy did not create the break, that still does not change the fact that he made it through the gap between dimensions, and is now here in this one. Not only that, but I also was able to pick up on the energy of something, or someone else guiding him somewhere. Sidious scowled as he listened and started to consider the implications of this. Even while Sidious took great satisfaction in his ability to control every aspect of the Republic thus far, he disliked surprises. Who knew what would happen to Ghost Uchiha's ambitions if this enemy of his was now in this dimension? Particularly if the adversary had succeeded in turning Ghost Uchiha into a shadow of his former self. The identity of the second entity Ghost Uchiha had been able to perceive, however, was the aspect Sidious found most unsettling. The other entity you sensed did it seem to come from your enemy's dimension? According to Ghost Uchiha, I don't know. All I could sense was it was an entity that seemed to feel like life itself. Binding, and yet surrounding one's own self all at the same time. Sidious scowled at that point since he knew it meant only one thing. Ghost Uchiha's adversary has been sent here by the Force itself. This altered everything, albeit Sidious was unsure of the reason. No? Sidious sulked within. An intruder from somewhere else destroyed the ages my order had spent preparing our consolidation of power. What is the name of this enemy of yours? Then Ghost Uchiha uttered a word he had grown to hate. A name he detested more than the headmaster of the Shodan. His name is Naruto, the fifth headmaster of Hyde Ninja Village Ekuger no Sato, the Hidden Leaf Village, the so-called savior of the ninja world, and the supposed reincarnation of the Sage of the Six Paths. He and his now departed blood brother Naruto friend Uchiha had both played equal parts in my defeat, and I promised myself I would have my revenge on them somehow, and if not them directly, then their descendants would suffice. But I suppose if he is now here in this dimension, then I will happily take my revenge in due time. Well, that is a fair goal to be sure. But how exactly will you go about achieving said revenge? Replied Sidious. After all, judging by your current condition, I doubt you would be fit to crush a simple cockroach. Ghost Uchiha asserted, patience will make all things possible. As much as I would like to crush that naive fool right now, I am willing to wait. Sidious concurred, saying, a good minute to go by. Knowing he had to play his cards exactly right, or it would backfire, the Sith Lord suggested, well, in that instance, would I suggest a proposition of sorts? And unless he had backup plans in place, Sidious didn't want to risk that happening. Ghost Uchiha said, I'm listening. He didn't like the thought of working with this stranger, but he knew he had few options given his condition, so he decided to roll the dice and see what would happen. However, a backup plan started to form in the back of his mind, particularly in case Sidious tried to kill him later and steal his clan's abilities. Later, Sidious thought about what had just happened during the last few hours as he sat in meditation, immersing himself completely in the essence of the dark side. Even though he was happy that his foresight had led to this chance, it also brought with it something very unsettling. Even Sidious was not yet well versed in all facets of the dark side, despite the knowledge his forebears had accumulated dating back to Darth Bane. It was extremely unsettling to learn that Ghost Uchiha and other warriors like him, known as SHL ninjas and Kunoichis, existed in a different dimension and possessed skills that could nearly surpass those of an experienced Grand Master, whether GD or Sith. Particularly this Naruto and the power he possessed, and even more so the power that the nine-tailed fox, a tailed beast, bestowed to him. The Sith Lord was deeply troubled by the fact that it didn't take him long to discover that none of the latter two could ever be persuaded to turn to the dark side, much less controlled by him. I've never been one for surprises, so the fact that this Ghost Uchiha's opponent is now in my dimension was not something I anticipated. The voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere said, "It seems your foresight isn't as effective as you thought, Sidious." Then, knowing who had spoken to him, Sidious scowled. He shot back, "Only a mere lapse, nothing more. Besides, I have gained a new partner in the form of Ghost Uchiha, which wouldn't have happened had my foresight not shown me." True, but that still doesn't mean it's effective. After all, you didn't expect someone else to survive the transition, now did you? Asked the Force. Then Sidious growled. "That interloper is of little concern to me. And even if he is foolish enough to interfere with my plans, I will deal with him the same way I have dealt with all my enemies. That's the Force, convert them to your side. Or just eliminate him because you wouldn't be able to control him." Sidious frowned even more as he made an effort to ignore the Force's rightness, no matter how futile. As I said before, he is of little concern to me, even with his power. The true power is in the dark side, not in the light, and especially not the words from a demon-possessed idealist. And yet, why do I sense a great deal of fear from you in regards to him, and even towards Ghost Uchiha? Asked the Force. Afraid that there are beings out there that can make your power pale in comparison. Sidious angrily exclaimed, "And you believe the light is superior? Your supposed followers have allowed themselves to become complacent based on their own arrogance, never believing that there is unlimited power in other avenues, and you have stood by and allowed them to become this way. The Sith Order wanted something better for the galaxy, hence their birth. And as such they found true strength in the dark side. Granted, many Siths have allowed themselves to become nothing more than wild nexus and tear at each other mindlessly, but that had only been because of their own unwillingness to adopt patience again, until Master Bane revolutionized it. Of course, by that point the GD saw us as nothing but mindless beasts that needed to be put down for good, as they continued to eradicate us. The Sith's righteous revenge is much more than personal. True balance, true peace can only be obtained by seizing it, not by being subservient. If there is a punishment for going the former route as opposed to the latter, then so be it. And although Ghost Uchiha appearing does change things, the result will still be the same. Not only that, but his power will eventually be of use to me, and as a courtesy I will finish what he could not and eliminate that interloper Naruto. My only regret is that I didn't prevent the GD Order from training that Anakin Skywalker boy, which is quite a shame. I would have indeed watched his career with great interest, especially someone with his potential. But I suppose him being sent back to that sand bowl of a planet only proves how the weak will always die off to make room for the strong. Even a desert rat is not immune to that. The Force said, "And you accuse my followers of being arrogant. You may think you have the upper hand, Sidious, but in reality you are playing with such a weak hand it is not even worth laughing. But by all means, go ahead and bask in this opportunity you have found, but don't think your will surpasses my own. My will shall be done, and you will be made to answer for your deeds, one way or another." Sidious remarked, "That remains to be seen, trickster. This republic will belong to me yet, and everyone will have to choose to either side with me and have true order, or step aside, lest they wish to for me to bring my righteous fury upon them." The Force merely laughed lightly. "How little you understand anything, Sidious," she replied. "But by all means, proceed with your new plans. But remember, no matter what you do, my will shall still be carried out, and true balance will be restored. After all, I decreed as much eons ago." Sidious now had a chance to chuckle, since he was aware that the Force was referring to the prophecy concerning the Chosen One. He questioned mockingly, "And yet, where is this Chosen One to challenge me? Nowhere. And even if this individual does exist, events have already been set into motion that he cannot stop. Encountering Ghost Uchiha only creates more of an opportunity for me to gain ever more power. And if he exists now and you have just kept him away from my sphere of influence, then mark my words. I will find him and deal with him in my own time and way. Whether it be by converting him or simply destroying him." The Force said in a final tone, "We shall see, Sidious. We shall see."